The aft deck of the Halcyon had never been this silent. 100 guests in silk and diamonds stood frozen along the rails of the 200-foot superyacht, champagne going warm in their hands, and not one of them was breathing. Beyond the gold-lit deck, the harbor of Monaco glittered like a spilled jewelry box, and above it a mistral was building, dragging white streaks across a darkening sea. At the center of the deck stood Allegra Castellane, in a gown that cost more than the crew earned in a season, clutching a framed certificate against her chest with both hands. Her knuckles had gone white. The frame was shaking. A few steps away, in a plain crew polo still damp with salt water, stood the man she had spent all week calling the help. The quiet older deckhand she had ordered to polish her rails, fetch her ice, and disappear. He was not shouting. He was not even angry. He simply held out one weathered hand toward the framed certificate in her arms and said the words that would end Allegra Castellane's entire world. That paper isn't worth the frame, and I would know. I'm the man whose name they forged on it. A phone lay face up on a teak table, its screen still glowing from the call that had just ended. The call that had torn the most powerful people on that deck the color of ash. The captain would not meet anyone's eyes. Sylvie Castellane, the matriarch who truly ran the empire, had half risen from her chair and forgotten to close her mouth. And Allegra, whose grandmother had bought her the gown, the guests, the whole floating world she stood in, finally understood exactly who she had spent the entire week treating like furniture. To understand how a man in a €10 crew shirt grounded a shipping dynasty's flagship in front of 100 witnesses, and why every important person on that deck was suddenly terrified of him, we have to go back a few days, to a bright Riviera morning, a gangway called a Passerelle, and the first cruel thing Allegra Castellane said to the man she thought was nobody. The old port of Monaco smelled of salt and diesel and money, and Thomas Race loved two of those three. He stood at the foot of the Halcyon's Passerelle, the polished gangway that bridged the quay to the yacht, with a duffel bag over one shoulder and the unhurried stillness of a man who had spent his whole life around boats and had stopped being impressed by the big ones a long time ago. He was 60, wiry and sun-cured, with steady gray eyes and hands so scarred by 4 decades of rope and steel that no manicure on the Riviera could have undone them. He looked up the white flank of the superyacht the way other men looked at a mountain, not with awe, but with assessment. He read the waterline, he read the fenders. He read the little brown weep stain under a hole fitting that told him someone had painted over a problem instead of fixing it, and he filed it away without changing his face. Because Thomas Race was not really the new deckhand his crew contract said he was. His full title, printed on a card zipped into the lining of his duffel, was Founder and Chief Surveyor of the Trident Register, the most respected independent classification society in the superyacht world, the small and stubborn organization whose green certificate every serious vessel in the Mediterranean needed in order to legally carry a single paying guest. A yacht without class was a yacht that could not be insured, could not be chartered, and in most ports could not even leave the harbor. And the man who decided whether a vessel earned that certificate or lost it was standing at the bottom of the gangway in a borrowed polo, pretending to be nobody. You can lie to an owner, his old master used to say. You cannot lie to the sea. That master was the reason Thomas was standing there at all. 44 years earlier, he had started at the very bottom of this world, a 15-year-old deckhand on a battered sardine trawler out of a gray Portuguese town, hauling nets in weather that would send these Monaco yachts running for harbor. An old skipper named Mestre Almeida had taken him on, taught him engines and knots and weather, and then the thing that mattered more than any of it. A certificate is a promise, Almeida told him, holding up a brass compass with a cracked glass face. It says a stranger looked at this boat with honest eyes and swore she'd bring her people home. Break that promise, and the sea collects. Always. It doesn't care about your name. Thomas had carried Almeida's words,
and his cracked compass up through every rank there was.
And he had learned, the hardest way, what happened when that promise got broken. When Tomas was 19, the trawler Undina had gone out overloaded because her owner wanted one more haul before a storm the whole harbor could see coming. She capsized in the black water off the coast, and old Almeida had drowned, shoving 3 panicking boys, Tomas among them, into the one life raft that worked, because the second had been left to rot and folded under them like wet paper. Clinging to that raft, watching the lights of his master's life go out, Tomas had made a promise of his own, that no owner would ever again convince himself a schedule or a party or a profit was worth more than the people on the water. That was why he still put on a crew shirt at 60. It was why he was here. Because 3 weeks earlier, a photograph had arrived at the Trident Register's quiet office in Lisbon, sent anonymously from a burner email by someone frightened. It showed a framed Trident-class certificate hanging proudly in the salon of the motor yacht Halcyon, flagship of Castellane Maritime. And Tomas, who had personally shaped the Trident certificate into the most trusted paper on the Mediterranean, looked at that photo for 4 seconds before the back of his neck went cold. He knew it was a forgery, the way a mother knows a photograph of the wrong child. Someone had faked the one document he had spent his life making unforgeable, and a 200-foot vessel full of guests was sailing on the strength of that lie. So he had done what he always did when the truth hid somewhere a boardroom couldn't reach, signed on his crew under a common name, and gone to find it himself. Into that bright morning, the young woman who would define Tomas's week arrived the way she always did, in a convoy of noise.
A low black car swept onto the quay and stopped across the painted service lane, blocking the crew's provisioning route. Allegra Castellan stepped out into the Riviera sun in enormous sunglasses, checked her reflection in the black window, and looked around for someone to carry things. Her eyes landed on the nearest man in a crew polo, Tomas. "You, whatever your name is." She snapped her fingers and pointed at a small mountain of matched luggage the drivers were unloading. "Get all of that aboard and into the owner's suite. And be careful. One mark on the calfskin and it comes out of your wages," which I imagine are tragic. Tomas looked at the bags, then at her, and did not reach for them. "Morning," he said mildly. "Your car's across the provisioning lane. The galley's waiting on a chill delivery and it'll spoil in this sun. I'll move your bags gladly, soon as the car's clear so the food can come aboard." Allegra lowered her sunglasses an inch, taking in the scarred hands, the plain polo, the salt-stained deck shoes, and a slow, delighted smile spread across her face. The smile of a woman who had just found something to be amused by. "Oh, you're one of the deck people," she said, as though naming a species. "The ones who live down here with the ropes and the diesel. How rustic." 2 of her friends drifted over, sensing entertainment. "Darling, I have been stepping onto boats like this since before you learned to tie your little knots, so let me explain how it works, because clearly no one has. There are guests, and there is the help. You will never be a guest, so carry the bags, and try not to speak again." "I'll say it once more," Tomas said, unbothered. "Move the car off the lane or nothing comes aboard. Not your bags, not the food, not the flowers. That's not me being difficult. That's just the order things have to happen in so nobody goes hungry at your party."
Allegra did not move the car. She held his gaze for one long second. Long enough that something flickered behind her eyes, some small uncertainty she did not like. And then she laughed, waved a hand at a passing officer to deal with the rude one, and clicked away up the Passerelle in heels never meant for a wet deck. It was the way the old man had simply stood there, unafraid, that made her decide to hate him. Up on the main deck, in the shade of the awning, an older woman in a stewardess's uniform was polishing glasses one at a time, holding each to the light. Rosa Delgado was 58, from a fishing family herself, and had crewed for the Castellanes for 25 years, long enough to have rocked a baby Allegra to sleep on night crossings, long enough that the older guests still asked for her by name. She kept boiled sweets in her apron for seasick guests and knew every child aboard by their favorite breakfast. The younger crew loved her. She looked up as Tomas came aboard with his duffel, and her tired face creased into a grin. "There he is," she said, "the new hand. You eat yet? You have the look of a man who forgets." "I'll eat," Tomas said, which was what he always said. "You'll faint," Rosa corrected, and pressed a boiled sweet into his scarred hand like a stern aunt. "Long day rigging for the party, not on an empty stomach." Tomas smiled, a real one, the kind almost no one got to see. For all the gold on this boat, this woman had been kinder to a stranger she thought was a broke old deckhand in 10 seconds than most of the wealthy families he'd surveyed for had been to anyone in a lifetime. Rosa did not know she was being kind to the one man who could decide the fate of the vessel under her feet. That was exactly why it counted. He noticed her the way he noticed a well-spliced line, a small, sound thing in a structure he already suspected was rotten.
He met the second good soul an hour later, down in the crew mess. Lucia Fernandez was a junior stewardess, barely into her 20s, folding napkins with the tight, careful movements of someone who could not afford a mistake. Tomas knew that look, someone who sent most of her wages home, in Lucia's case to a mother and younger brother outside Porto, and lay awake terrified that one bad word from the wrong guest could end it all. When a service bell rang 3 times and she flinched and sent a tray of cutlery clattering to the deck, going scarlet as a passing officer sighed, Tomas crouched and helped her gather it, unhurried. "First season on a big one?" he asked. "Is it that obvious?" she whispered. "You already did the hard part," he said, handing her a fork. "You showed up scared, and you're doing the work anyway. That's the whole job. The rest is just practice." He smiled. "I've fished worse decks than this, in worse weather. You'll be fine." She laughed, surprised, grateful, and something in her shoulders dropped an inch. What Tomas did not say, because he could not yet, was that he had a very good guess who had sent that frightened photograph to Lisbon from a burner email. He said nothing, but he made a note of her courage and filed it beside Rosa's kindness, and had no idea yet how much both would matter before the week was out. Kindness, Almeida used to say, is the one thing that never shows up on a survey and decides everything anyway. He had no idea how hard the next few days were about to test all of it. If you want to understand how much power a 25-year-old can have when no one has ever told her no, you only had to watch Allegra Castellani move through the halcyon. Doors were held, trays appeared, a stewardess stood ready outside her suite from 6 each morning in case she woke and wanted something. Her grandmother, Sylvie Castellane, had built Castellane Maritime from a single rust-streaked coaster into an empire of container ships, tankers, and this gleaming flagship, and had raised her only granddaughter to believe the world was a service and she was its permanent guest of honor. Allegra wore that certainty like her sunglasses, indoors, unnecessary, impossible to see past. She believed rules were a thing that happened to smaller people, down on the deck, among the ropes. And from the moment she came aboard, she made the people who worked there her entertainment. It started small, the way cruelty always does. On the first evening, Lucia brought her a still water instead of the specific volcanic sparkling brand Allegra favored, and Allegra made the girl stand holding the tray while she explained, loudly for the benefit of her friends, that this is exactly the problem with hiring people from nowhere. They simply don't have the palate to know the difference. She left the water untouched and, as a joke, tucked the tip into her own clutch in front of the girl. Lucia, who had a brother counting on that money, kept her chin level and said, "Of course, mademoiselle, I'll bring the other." It cost her something to keep her voice steady. Tomas, coiling a line at the edge of the deck, saw exactly what it cost, and he did not forget it. Then the boat itself became the problem. Because here was the thing that truly set Allegra off that week. She had assumed the party would be the event of the season, and the crew, with their tedious talk of weather windows and passenger limits, kept treating it like a logistics problem instead of her God-given right. She had invited 120 guests to a midnight party, followed by an overnight repositioning down the coast to Saint-Tropez, capped with a fireworks and laser display fired from the yacht's own foredeck. She wanted it enormous. She wanted it talked about. And she did not once ask whether the boat she was standing on could safely do what she was demanding of it. Captain Sophia Moreau tried to tell her. Moreau was 53, a career mariner who had come up through cargo ships and cruise vessels with the flat calm of someone the sea had frightened often enough to earn her respect. She came to the owner's deck with a weather printout and laid it out plainly. "Mademoiselle, I have to be straight with you. There's a Mistral building, strong offshore wind. It'll kick up a short, steep sea by tonight. 120 guests is well over the number this vessel is certified to carry safely on passage. I can run the party alongside, here at the quay, with everyone able to step ashore. But I cannot take that many souls out overnight into building weather. And the foredeck pyrotechnics are hard no near the fuel vents. It's my job to bring everyone home. That's the one thing I won't bend on."
Allegra took off her sunglasses so Moreau could see precisely how little she cared. "We sail," she said. "My grandmother owns half the sea between here and Shanghai. I did not invite 120 people to bob at a dock like a pedalo. We sail. We do the fireworks." She put the sunglasses back on. Captain Moreau, to her credit, did not bend that day. But Tomas, coiling a line 10 feet away, invisible in his crew polo, saw the whole rotten mechanism of it laid out clean. Not one cartoon villain, but a chain of ordinary, frightened, decent people being slowly bent, one at a time, by someone who had never once been told no. He saw Moreau's jaw tighten. He saw the first officer look at his shoes. He saw exactly how a disaster gets built, not by one big evil decision, but by 100 small surrenders to someone who cannot be refused. And he saw the cruelty spread, the way it always does, to whoever was weakest. That someone was Rosa. It happened at the owner's dinner. Rosa, 25 years aboard, the woman who had once walked a colicky infant Allegra up and down a heaving deck at 3 in the morning so her parents could sleep, brought out the fish course a few minutes late because the galley's chill delivery had been held up that morning by a car parked across the provisioning lane. Allegra, hunting a target in front of her friends, found one. Late. Again. She did not look up. "You know, I actually remember you from when I was small. You were old even then. Isn't it a little sad, still carrying plates at your age, still in the same apron, still serving the same family, still nobody?" Her friends tittered. "My grandmother keeps you out of charity. I'd have retired you to a nice little room somewhere years ago, where you couldn't slow anything down."
Rosa's hands trembled around the platter, but 25 years had taught her to swallow worse. "Of course, mademoiselle," she said quietly, and set the fish down with perfect, steady grace, and it was the grace that made it unbearable to watch. Tomas, refilling a water carafe at the sideboard, felt something cold and still settle in his chest. The patient, dangerous anger of a man who has the power to end the scene and is choosing, for now, to let it play out to the end. He said nothing. He simply added Rosa's name to a private ledger that was getting longer by the hour. But Allegra was not finished handing him reasons. The next morning, she made a sport of the crew. She had Lucia repolish an entire rail over a smudge no one else could see, narrating the girl's failures to a friend on the phone. She summoned Tomas to move a chaise lounge 4 inches, then back, then exactly where it started, 3 times, smiling. "Useful at last," she said. "Simple things for simple men." Tomas moved the chair each time without a word, and each time he bent down he read another small truth about the boat. A sundeck fire hydrant with an inspection tag 2 years out of date, a lifebuoy light with a dead, corroded battery,
He filed each one away in that same growing ledger. And then she found the crewman she could break for sport, an old deckhand named Old Emu, 63, who had crewed the Halcyon since before Allegra was born, and who had one bad hip and one enormous heart. She caught him moving slowly with a coil of heavy line and decided his slowness was an insult to her mourning. "God, watch him shuffle," she said, loud enough to carry, pulling out her phone to film. "This is the crew my grandmother pays for? Say something for my friends, Granddad. No? Just gonna stand there like a bollard?" She circled him with the camera while he stood, cap in his weathered hands, cheeks burning, too proud to answer and too frightened for his job to walk away.
Tomas crossed the deck before he had decided to. He stepped between the phone and the old man, not roughly, just decisively, and picked up the heavy coil of line himself. "I've got this run," he said quietly to Emilio. He gave the old man a way to leave with his back straight. Then he turned and looked once directly into Allegra's camera with those calm, unreadable gray eyes until she lowered the phone without quite knowing why. "You," she said, and her voice was pure ice. "I don't know what your problem is, deck boy, but I am going to enjoy watching you lose this little job." She lifted the phone again and photographed his face. "Smile. I'm sending this straight to the captain and to my grandmother." Tomas let her take the photo. He had a feeling it would be useful later. He was right. He was not the only one Allegra tried to break. Cruelty, once rewarded, always spreads to whoever is bravest as well as whoever is weakest. And when Lucia quietly brought old Emilio a cup of tea in the crew mess afterward and murmured that filming him wasn't right, a friend of Allegra's overheard and reported it, and Allegra turned the full weight of her boredom on the girl. "Did the napkin girl just have an opinion?" she said, finding Lucia on the deck. "What's your name?" "No, don't tell me. There's no point learning it. I'll simply tell the agency there's a stewardess with an attitude, and by the end of the season, there won't be a you on any boat on this coast." She smiled. "That's how it works, darling. I don't remember your name. I don't have to. That's the entire point of being me, and the entire point of being you." Lucia's eyes filled, but she did not look away, and she did not apologize. Tomas watched a frightened young woman hold her ground for an old man who could do nothing for her, and felt the last of his patience turn into something harder and more useful. Later, passing her at the rail, he said quietly, so only she could hear, "You did the right thing. Whatever you already told the people who needed telling, you did right. Write down what you see this week. Times, names, exactly as it happens." Lucia went very still and looked at him with something between fear and hope, and did not ask how he knew. She whispered. That evening, in the last light on the foredeck, Tomas did a different kind of walk-around, the kind he had come aboard to do. Allegra had not merely insulted him. She had humiliated a loyal old stewardess, bullied a careful captain toward a lethal shortcut, mocked an old man for the crime of aging, and threatened the job of the one young woman brave enough to speak. She was building a pattern, and a pattern, Tomas knew, was exactly what turned a bad week into a finding. So he began, methodically, to gather it. Not raging, charting. And a man who charts is far more dangerous than a man who shouts.
Late that night, when the guests had gone ashore to their hotels and the boat was quiet, Tomas did two quiet things. First, he stepped into the darkened main salon, where the framed Trident certificate hung in a place of honor between two oil paintings, lit by its own little brass picture light. He did not take it down. He simply leaned in close, took a jeweler's loupe from his pocket, and studied the fine green guilloche border for a long, still moment. And there it was. Or rather, there it wasn't. The tiny, deliberate flaw in the engraving, the secret only he and two trustees in Lisbon knew to look for, was missing. The certificate was a forgery, confirmed by his own eyes. Second, he went below, down into the engine room, and ran his torch along a bulkhead near the fuel manifold.
And under a skin of fresh marine paint, exactly where a weep stain on the hull had told him to look, he found the puckered, discolored steel of metal that had been very badly burned and then hidden. He photographed both. He did not yet know how far up the company the lie went, but he had a feeling, and he was right. The week was supposed to end the way every Castellane demand ended, with the crew caving, the boat doing whatever Allegra wanted, and the party sailing on schedule. And for a day, it looked like it would. Because Allegra made one more call to a man named Etienne Belmonte, Castellane Maritime's director of fleet operations, a smooth, tired executive whose entire career consisted of making the family's problems disappear. "There's a nervous captain and an insolent deckhand ruining my party," she told him. "The captain is refusing to sail. Fix it. I want this boat cleared to leave for the fireworks, and I want that old deckman gone by tomorrow, or I'm telling my grandmother which of her managers can't handle a simple event."
Belmonte did what he always did. He came down to the quay, took Captain Moreau aside, and applied the quiet pressure that had bent this company for years. "Sophia, it's one night, a short hop down the coast. The weather's a bit of wind, nothing this hull hasn't seen. The extra guests, we'll call them day visitors on the manifest, and nobody counts. Take her out, do the girls' fireworks, and this all goes away." It was, almost word for word, the logic Tomas had heard destroy a boat once before. One more haul before the storm, the schedule worth more than the souls. And this was the line the whole week had been walking toward. Because Belmonte had a deeper reason to want the Halcyon sailing and no one asking questions. One that reached back 3 months to a night no guest was ever told about. On a charter that spring, an electrical fault had started a fire in the engine room. The fixed fire suppression system, meant to flood the space and smother the flames, discharged only part way and failed because it had never been properly serviced. The crew beat the fire out by hand, and by luck, no one died. The blaze scorched a structural bulkhead near the fuel manifold and destroyed one of the yacht's 2 life raft stations. A proper repair meant hauling her out, months out of the water in the earnings season, and an inspection that would expose how close she'd come to being a headline.
So Belmonte had chosen the other path. He had ordered a cosmetic patch, fresh paint over burnt steel. He had the destroyed life rafts replaced with cheap, second-hand, out-of-service units, repacked with forged servicing tags. He had the crew's rest hour records falsified so the short-staffed boat looked legal on paper. And because none of it could pass a real survey, he had commissioned a forged Trident-class certificate, a beautiful fake, good enough to hang on a salon wall and fool an insurer, carrying the name of the one register everyone trusted. The certificate that let every guest aboard, that kept the charters flowing, that told 120 people it was safe to sail, was a lie printed to protect a season's profit. It was, in miniature, exactly the machine that had once left a 19-year-old boy clinging to a life raft in the dark. Captain Moreau did not know all of it, but she knew enough. She had seen the paint. She had questioned the raft tags. She had refused quietly for weeks to stop asking, and she had a growing sick certainty about the certificate on the salon wall. And now Belmonte was standing on her quay, telling her to take 120 souls out overnight into a mistral on a boat she no longer trusted, with life rafts she did not believe would float. For one terrible moment, the mortgage on her little house, the 9 years, the family that could end her career with a phone call, she reached for the pen to sign the sailing order. "Don't," Tomas said. He had come up the crew stairs quietly and was standing in the passage, a coil of lines still over his shoulder. He did not raise his voice. "Don't sign that, Captain. You felt it all week. You know that boat isn't right. A number on a manifest can't hold a hull together, and a tag on a raft can't inflate it." Belmonte rounded on him. "And who exactly are you to interrupt? You're a deckhand, casual crew. Get off this quay before I have your contract torn up by dinner." Tomas looked at him for a long, level moment.
Then he looked at Moreau. "Captain, every choice here costs you something. I understand that better than you could know. But there is only one version of tonight where you can still promise every guest on that Passerelle that you did your job." He paused. "Don't sail her. I'll make sure it costs you less than you're afraid of." Moreau put the pen down. "I'm not taking her out tonight," she said, and her voice shook, and she said it anyway. "Not with that many aboard. Not in this weather. Not on rafts I don't trust. Party alongside or not at all." Belmonte's face went ugly. And here the machine did what machines like it always do. It looked for someone to punish. Within the hour, two things happened. Captain Sophia Moreau was quietly relieved of command, pending review, for refusing a lawful operational instruction and jeopardizing a client event, a Castellan euphemism for embarrassing the family's granddaughter. And a more compliant relief captain was summoned overnight from Nice. And old Emilio, whose only crime was being slow and being famed, was put ashore that same evening for the season. His contract terminated on Belmonte's direct word, so Allegra would not have to look at him at her party.
Those details were not small ones. Emilio's crew wage was the whole reason a grandchild back home stayed in school. The same phone call that dismissed him for aging switched off a household 2 countries away. And Moreau's removal meant that a careful mariner who had just refused to risk 120 lives would be blamed for the delay she had caused by trying to save them, while a relief captain who owed the family everything was brought in to take the boat out anyway. So Allegra Castellane's week of boredom had not merely mocked an old man and a stewardess. It had reached out and broken the 2 people brave enough to say no, and cleared the last obstacle between a forged certificate and a night sail into a storm. When Tomas learned that Moreau had been relieved and Emilio put ashore, when he watched the old man carry his sea bag down the Passerelle for the last time, stopping at the bottom to lay one hand flat on the hull he'd served for 30 years, the way you'd say goodbye to a horse, something in him that had stayed patient all week went very still and very cold. This was the line the whole week had been walking toward. Not rudeness, not a moved deck chair, a fire hidden under paint, rafts that wouldn't float, and 2 honest people crushed for refusing to be part of it. He found Emilio on a bollard at the end of the quay, sea bag at his feet, staring at the boat. 30 years, the old man said. Not bitter, just lost. I taught half these officers to splice a line, and they send me home so a girl doesn't have to see an old man at her party. He looked at his cap in his hands. My grandson starts his exams next month. I told him his Gito would pay the fees. What do I tell him now? Tomas sat on the bollard beside him. For a long moment he said nothing. Out on the water, the Halcyon sat gleaming, waiting for a crew that would bend. Emilio, Tomas said finally, and his voice had changed. Something underneath it had gone very quiet and very hard. I need you to trust me for one day. Don't sign whatever they send you. Don't cash anything. Stand up for what, my friend? They have decided. People like them always win the season. Not this season, Tomas said, and put his scarred hand over the old man's. One day. And after tomorrow, you'll never again have to ask a person like her for permission to matter. Then Tomas Race walked to the quiet end of the quay, took the card out of the lining of his duffel, and looked at it for a long moment. Founder-in-Chief Surveyor, Trident Register, and thought about a cracked brass compass, and a life raft in the dark, and a promise to a man who could no longer hear him. He took out his phone and dialed the one number he had been saving all week. Enrique Diaz had been Tomas's deputy at the Trident Register for 20 years and did not rattle easily. When his phone rang near midnight and the screen said Tomas, he sat up. Tell me what you're standing on, Diaz said. A boat that should already be in a shipyard, Tomas said, and told him everything. The forged certificate,
The burnt bulkhead under fresh paint, the dead fire system, the rafts with false tags, the falsified crew hours, the bumped captain, and a party about to sail into a mistral, overloaded. When he finished, there was a short silence. "You could void that certificate tonight, on your own authority, and be entirely correct," Diaz said. "So tell me why you haven't."
Because voiding one certificate quietly is a bad night for them and a lesson for no one, Tomas said. I've watched this company bend good people all week, Enrique. The rot isn't one boat. It's a culture that thinks a survey is a thing you buy when the real one is inconvenient. I don't want to file a report that a lawyer buries by autumn. Then don't make the scene, Diaz said, and Tomas could hear the old surveyor smiling. Build the case. Move quietly. And when you're ready, let them make the scene. At their own party. What followed over the next day was a masterclass in patience. Tomas did not storm the bridge or flash his card. Working the phone from the shadow of a deck locker, he did what 44 years on the water had taught him. He gathered the truth until it was too heavy for any fortune to lift. First, the machine's own memory. The Halcyon carried a voyage data recorder, the maritime black box, and Diaz arranged through the flag state to have its data quietly preserved and read. There it was, in a language no lawyer could argue with. The night of the fire, logged in temperature spikes, alarms, and the telltale partial discharge of a system that should have flooded the space, and hadn't. A crew could be pressured to keep quiet. The black box could not be talked into forgetting. It was the one fingerprint no money could scrub. Second, the paper. Quietly, lawfully, the real records were preserved beside the forged ones. The genuine repair invoices for a cosmetic patch instead of a structural fix. The purchase records for secondhand life rafts. The forged raft servicing tags. The falsified crew rest hour logs. And most damning, Belmonte's own messages, pulled with the flag state's authority from the company's operational chain. Patch it and keep her earning. The season's worth more than a resurvey. Get a certificate sorted so the insurer's happy. Nobody needs to know. Pressure and fraud in writing with a name on it. Third, and this was the piece that turned a safety finding into a reckoning, the certificate itself. Over 30 years, Tomas had built the Trident certificate into the most trusted document on the Mediterranean and had done one thing no forger could ever know to copy. Into the engraved border of every genuine certificate, he had woven a single deliberate imperfection. A break in the guilloche pattern the width of a hair in a place only he and two trustees could name. Every real certificate had it. No forgery ever could, because no forger knew it was there. The beautiful fake on the salon wall was perfect in every visible way and missing the one invisible thing that mattered. A forger could copy the seal, the paper, the signature. He could never copy a flaw he didn't know existed. Tomas was, quite literally, the only man alive who could prove that certificate was a lie, and the only one with authority to say what the true one would have said. But building a case in daylight is one thing. Staying invisible while a shipping dynasty's machine wakes up around you is another. And here the week turned genuinely tense. Because Etienne Belmonte had not survived 20 years of making problems vanish by being slow. The moment a captain refused a sailing order and a deckhand started making calls from quiet corners, his instincts fired. "Who is that old deckhand?" he told the relief captain. "Pull his file. I want to know who he really is, and I want him off my boat before the party." For an hour, the walls tightened. An officer went to bring the new deckhand to the crew office. If they made one call to the right desk and learned that the casual crew holding up a Castellane sailing was the founder of the very register whose certificate they'd forged, the company would lawyer up, freeze every record, and turn it into a 2-year paper war. And the forged certificate, the burnt bulkhead, the false raft tags might vanish into a shredder before anyone preserved them. Thomas called Diaz. "They're looking for me," he said. "Then we let them find exactly what we wish them to find," Diaz said. Quietly and lawfully, the registrar's office confirmed to the relief captain only that the man was casual seasonal crew, cleared for the manifest. True, dull, and impenetrable, while the flag state inspectors finished imaging the recorder and sealing the paperwork. Belmonte, reassured that the troublesome deckhand was just some old salt with a valid seaman's book, called off the search and turned back to the more important business of getting the boat ready to sail. It was the last mistake he would make before the party. Allegra, meanwhile, made a mistake of her own. She tried to buy a witness. She had noticed that the junior stewardess, the one with the attitude, had been writing things in a little notebook, and it made her uneasy in a way she could not name. So she had a friend find Lucia in the crew corridor and offer her an envelope, a month's wages, in cash, more, to sign a short statement saying the delay had been caused by an aggressive deckhand and a difficult captain, and that Mademoiselle Castellane had at all times behaved with grace.
For one long moment, Lucia thought about her brother's school fees, her mother's rent, everything she had risked. And then she thought about a scarred old man who told her that people who write things down are harder to erase. "No," she said. Her voice shook, but she said it. "You want the difference between me and her? I was kind to Emidio when no one important was watching." She pushed the envelope back. "I'm not for sale." She walked away on legs that barely held her and went straight to the man in the crew polo and pressed into his hands a notebook of times and names in careful handwriting, and folded inside it a printout she'd been too frightened to act on. Tomas took it the way another man would take gold. That was the company's fatal error. They had not merely forged a document and crushed two honest people. They had now tried to buy a false statement from a witness brave enough to refuse and honest enough to report it. The case had grown its sharpest edge, and they had handed it over themselves. The emotional low point came the next evening, in the hour before the guests arrived. Old Emidio, back on the quay in his good shirt as promised, but no longer believing, called his grandson to say he might not manage the exam fees after all. Tomas caught only the end of it. No, Filio, it's not your fault. Yoshido is just an old man." And then sat on his bollard with the dead phone in his lap, and for the first time, stopped believing it would come right. And Captain Moreau, relieved of command, found Tomas at the rail. "You warned me it would cost me. I did the right thing, and I'm the one going home while a boy from Nice takes her out tonight. Maybe some seasons the powerful just win, and a wise sailor learns when to stop fighting the current."
Tomas stood between the two of them, the relieved captain and the dismissed old hand, and made himself say the hardest sentence in the whole plan. "1 more hour," he told them both. "Give me 1 hour." Meanwhile, on the surface, nothing had changed, which is what made the noose so tight. The relief captain had signed the sailing order. The manifest had been quietly doctored to call 40 extra guests day visitors. The forged certificate hung gleaming on the salon wall for the arriving guests to admire. And Allegra, in her gown, was filming herself against the Monaco lights for her millions of followers. "Some of us," she purred to the camera, "are simply built for the sea. A little crew drama today, but your girl always sails." She found Tomas's face across the deck as she filmed, and smiled and mouthed, "You lose." "You keep saying it's your sea," Tomas said quietly, to no one, watching her through the rigging. "Say it a little louder in a minute." With the guests beginning to step aboard, an unexpected ally walked back up the Passerelle. Captain Sophia Moreau, no longer in uniform, carrying a slim folder. "That's my private log," she said, setting it in Tomas's hands. "Every entry Belmonte told me not to write. The fire, the paint, the raft tags I refused to accept, the messages telling me to sail. I kept my own copy the day he first pressured me. I should have gone to the register myself months ago. I was afraid for my career." She straightened. "Whatever you're about to do out there, I'll stand on that deck and say every word of it, to the flag state, to the register, to anyone." Tomas looked at Moreau's folder and Lucia's notebook and the recorder full of numbers that could not lie, and knew the case was whole.
There was one last piece. Dias called him back. "It's done," he said. "The flag state has an inspector standing by on the key, and the register's board is on the line. Given a forged class certificate, a concealed structural fire, non-compliant life-saving equipment, falsified crew records, and now an attempt to buy a witness, we have every ground to withdraw the Halcyon's class outright, and to open a fleet-wide review of every Castellane vessel we've ever certified. Without class, the flag state detains her at the quay tonight. She carries no one, anywhere. You've earned the right to close this yourself, Tomas." Tomas slid the phone into his pocket, felt the weight of the old brass compass there beside it, and looked out at the gleaming boat, the arriving guests, the forged certificate glowing on the salon wall, and a young woman in a gown filming her own victory. In a few minutes, the whole deck was going to learn who the new deckhand really was. The Halcyon blazed with light. 100 guests crowded the aft deck. A band played, champagne moved on silver trays. And beyond the harbor wall, the Mistral drove white streaks across a black building sea. On the bridge, the relief captain from Nice ran his checklist off the false manifest. On the foredeck, a crew wired the fireworks Moreau had forbidden near the fuel vents. And at the top of the Passerelle, greeting her guests like a queen, stood Allegra Castellane, phone in hand, ready to slip the lines. Into that glittering scene, at the edge of the party, a second car arrived on the quay, and out of it stepped the woman herself, Sylvie Castellane, 72, silver-haired and unhurried, the matriarch who truly ran Castellane Maritime, come to watch her granddaughter's triumph and to remind the whole harbor, by her mere presence, whose sea this really was. She settled into a chair on the aft deck like a monarch taking a throne.
And in a plain crew polo, at the top of the Passerelle, beside the framed certificate that had been carried out to the deck for the guests to admire, stood Tomas Heiress. The relief captain gave the order to make ready. A crewman moved to cast off the first line, and Tomas stepped forward, put one hand flat on the rail, and said, in a voice that was not loud, but carried the length of the deck, "Nobody cast off that line. This boat isn't going anywhere tonight." The band faltered. Allegra spun, and her face went from confusion to fury. "What are you... Put that line back. Who let the deck... Grandmere! Grandmere, tell them!" And at exactly that moment, a third figure came up the Passerelle, a woman in the quiet uniform of the Flag State's Maritime Authority, an inspector's case in her hand, 2 officers behind her. And Tomas's phone, resting on a teak table, lit up and connected on speaker, loud in the sudden hush. A voice came from it, clear across the whole deck. "This is the Trident Register, board in session. Effective immediately, the class certificate of the motor yacht Halcyon is withdrawn, on grounds of documented fraud and unseaworthiness. The vessel is not cleared to sail with any person aboard. Would the chief surveyor please confirm he is on site and in command of this action?" Sylvie Castellane's hand stopped halfway to her champagne, and the man in the crew polo reached into the lining of his jacket, drew out a worn card, and held it up so the gold light of the party and the green ink of the framed certificate both caught the same lettering. "Confirmed," Tomas said into the phone, not loudly because he did not need to. "Tomas Heiress, founder and chief surveyor, Trident Register. I'm on site. This vessel's class is withdrawn." And the whole deck turned the color of ash.
The relief captain's face drained white as he understood what he had almost signed for,
Etienne Belmonte, at the rail, actually took a step backward, as though distance could help. And Allegra Castellani stood frozen at the top of the Passerelle, phone still filming her own face as the pieces slammed together in her mind. Deck boy, carry the bags, the help, you'll never be a guest. I'm sending your face to my grandmother. Every contemptuous word she had said that week, she had said to the one man who could ground her family's entire fleet. Tomas picked up the framed certificate from the table and turned it to face the crowd. "You've been showing this to your guests all night," he said to Allegra. "Your family hangs it on the wall like a trophy. So let's talk about what it actually is." He tapped the glass. "This is a Trident-class certificate, or it's pretending to be. I built the Trident certificate over 30 years into the one piece of paper on this sea that a forger can't fake, because there's a mark in every real one. A single break in the engraved border, the width of a hair, in a place 3 people in the world know to look." He held the frame up to the light. "This one doesn't have it. It's a forgery. A beautiful, expensive forgery, hung on your wall to tell 120 guests it was safe to sail tonight. And I am the only man alive who can prove that, because I am the man whose name they forged on it." He laid it out then, one item at a time, calm as a surveyor reading a gauge. As he did, the flag state inspector connected a tablet to the big screen the band had used for the light show and turned it to face the deck, so that everyone, guests, crew, Sylvie herself, could see. There would be no need to take anyone's word for anything. The deck was about to see it.
The screen showed the black box trace from 3 months earlier. The temperature spike, the alarms, the half-failed suppression system. "This is your own boat's black box," Tomas said. 3 months ago, a fire broke out in that engine room. The system meant to put it out failed because no one had serviced it. The crew beat it out by hand and got lucky. A murmur moved through the guests, who minutes ago had been about to sail. Then, Tomas went on. The screen changed. The cosmetic repair invoices beside the burnt steel photograph he'd taken in the engine room, the purchase record for second-hand rafts, the forged servicing tags. Instead of fixing it properly, months in a yard, in the earning season, someone painted over the burnt steel, bought second-hand life rafts and forged their service tags, faked the crew's rest hours, and commissioned that forgery on the wall so the boat could keep carrying guests. Tonight, you were going to take 120 people out into a mistral, over the safe number, on a scarred hull, with rafts I would not trust to float a dog." He turned. "Captain Moreau refused to sail. You relieved her of command this morning for it. She is the reason every person on this deck is alive to be embarrassed right now." Sophia Moreau stepped forward from the crowd, pale and steady. "Every word is true," she said. "I kept my log. I'll swear to it before any authority in the world." Belmonte found his voice. "Now wait, the certificate was a temporary measure. The repair was signed off. You can't possibly—" Behind Tomas, the screen changed again, and Belmonte's own messages filled it, line by line. "Patch it and keep her earning. The season's worth more than a resurvey. Get a certificate sorted. Nobody needs to know." The deck read them in silence. Somewhere in the crowd, a guest said, very quietly, "We were about to get on this." "There's more," Tomas said, still not raising his voice. Lucia stepped out from the crew door, chin level. "I said no," she said. Tomas set it on the table with the rest. Trying to buy a witness to hide a safety fraud is a crime. Then he looked, last, up the Passerelle at Allegra, and past her to the silver-haired woman frozen in her chair. "And the person who set all of it running tonight," Tomas said, "spent the week treating the people keeping this boat afloat like something stuck to her shoe, and then demanded this vessel sail into a storm, over its safe number, for a fireworks show, because a party at the dock wasn't grand enough. Everything ugly that happened this week, the pressure, the forged papers.
the two good people thrown away, happened to clear the way for that one demand. On the screen, silent, played the clip of Allegra circling old Emilio with her phone, mocking a man 3 times her age for moving slowly. The Register's business is a safe ship, not manners. But an owner who bullies a crew into sailing a boat they know isn't safe. That is the most dangerous thing on any vessel. Money on the bridge. That is the exact thing we withdraw class to keep out. And here, at last, Sylvie Castellane rose. But she did not do what the crowd expected. She did not offer money. And she did not beg. She looked at the recorder trace. The messages. Her granddaughter frozen on the Passerelle. And made in 3 seconds the coldest calculation of her long life. And chose the Empire.
"Mr. Race," she said, her voice like a closing vault. "On behalf of Castellane Maritime, I offer the company's full cooperation with your register and the authorities." She turned not to her granddaughter, but away from her, addressing the guests and the phones already filming. "My director of operations acted without my knowledge, and my granddaughter is a spoiled child who was given a boat as a toy and understood nothing about the sea it floats on. She does not speak for this company." She said it clearly, for the record, for the lawyers, for the headlines, about the girl she had raised. Then she picked up her clutch and walked toward the Passerelle and did not look back at Allegra once. And that, not the withdrawn certificate, not the inspector, not the crowd, was the thing that broke Allegra Castellane. Because she had never, in her life, heard the word no. And now, she was hearing it from the entire deck at once. And worst of all, from the woman whose favor was the only currency she had ever truly banked. And she did not freeze, and she did not rage. She began, frantically, to give orders, the only thing she knew how to do.
"Cast off the lines," she said to the nearest crewman, her voice climbing. "We're sailing. Now. My grandmother doesn't mean it." The crewman looked at her and looked at Tomas and did not move. "You," she said, wheeling on the relief captain. "Start the engines." The relief captain took off his cap, set it on a table, and stepped back into the crowd. "He's the help!" And one by one, quietly, they refused. The bosun folded his arms. A young deckhand looked at the deck. Lucia did not move. Rosa, standing in the salon doorway, simply shook her head once. Not a single hand on that boat would cross the deck to do what Allegra Castellane commanded. Because she had never once, in her whole gilded life, crossed anything for any of them. Her orders got smaller and smaller. "Cast off. Please. Somebody. Cast off the..." And then she ran out of words, standing alone in her gown among 100 guests, the only silence on a deck full of people, giving commands that fell into the sea unanswered. She looked around for someone, anyone, to stand with her, and found her friends studying their champagne, and her grandmother's back already at the top of the Passerelle, and Belmonte being quietly walked toward the flag state officers. And in that silence, on the deck she had called hers, Allegra Castellane understood something that would outlast any headline. She had spent her whole life surrounded by people, and not one of them would take a single step for her now, because she had never once taken a step for anyone else. Slowly, in her gown, she sat down on the polished teak she had ordered a stranger to scrub, and she had absolutely nothing to say. Tomas looked up at her, and his voice, when it came, was quieter now, almost gentle. "You kept asking me all week if I knew whose boat this is," he said. "Out here, that was never the question. A boat doesn't belong to whoever shouts loudest on her deck.
She belongs to whoever keeps the people on her alive. The only question that has ever mattered at sea is whether everyone aboard gets home. And the answer to that question has a name on it. For this vessel, tonight, that name is mine. He set the forged frame face down on the table. And for what it's worth, none of this had to be your night. If you'd let the old man keep his job, or been decent to the girl who brought you water, or let your captain do hers, you'd be dancing under those lights right now with a clean conscience. You were handed a life most people can't dream of. But Tomas was not finished, because a good ending is never only about who falls. It is about who finally gets to rise. He walked down the Passerelle to the quay, to the bollard where old Emilio sat in his good shirt, exactly as he'd been asked, not quite believing. "Emilio," Tomas said, "I'm sorry it took so long. I couldn't tell you who I was until the work was done." He smiled. "Now, about those exam fees." He raised his voice for the deck above. "This man gave 30 years to this boat and was put ashore so a girl wouldn't have to see him. The Trident Register keeps a list of the finest working seamen on this coast, the ones who train the crews the rest of us trust our lives to. Emilio's name goes at the top of it tomorrow, with the wage that goes with it, and his grandson sits those exams." The old man pressed Tomas's scarred hand between both of his, and could not speak at all.
"You taught half the officers on this coast to splice a line," Tomas said gently. "You spent your life keeping other people's children safe on the water for a wage that never once got you near a party like this. Tonight, you were the most important man on this whole quay, and the only one who understood it was a girl who brought you tea. That's the lesson." Then he found Captain Moreau and Lucia beside her. "You were both punished today for doing exactly the right thing when it was expensive," Tomas said, loud enough for the board still on the line to hear. "That ends tonight. Captain Moreau's relief is void, and her refusal to sail an unsafe ship goes into the record as precisely what it was. The reason this night ends with a boat at a dock instead of a search at sea. Any owner on this coast would be lucky to have her." He turned to Lucia. "And you are not going back to an agency that lets people be bought and sold. The Register trains surveyors, the people who look at boats with honest eyes so strangers get home. It cannot be taught to someone who can be bought. I watched you refuse an envelope tonight that would have solved every problem you have. That is the whole job, and you already have it in you. There's a place in the next cadet class with your name on it if you want it." Lucia pressed both hands over her mouth. A few feet away, Rosa, who had brought a boiled sweet to a stranger she thought was nobody, was laughing and crying at once.
"And one more thing," Tomas said, and took the cracked brass compass from his pocket and held it up so it caught the party lights. "There's going to be an award, the Almeida Award, in the name of an old skipper who drowned putting 3 frightened boys into the one life raft that worked because a greedy man sent a boat out overloaded before a storm. It goes every year to the crew member, deck, interior, engine, any of them, who protects a stranger who can do nothing for them in return. Emilio, Rosa, Lucia, Captain Moreau, you're all on the first list." The deck, which had held its breath, finally let it go. Crew were grinning. A guest began to applaud, and the whole quay joined in. At the edge of it, quietly, the flag state officers were speaking with Etienne Belmonte, who was no longer smooth at all. Allegra was helped to her feet by a single embarrassed friend, no longer a queen of the sea, just a young woman who had never been told no, and had now been told it by an entire harbor at once, while her grandmother's car pulled away from the quay without her, its taillights swallowed by the Monaco night. As it went, the last thing Allegra saw was the man in the crew polo, crouched beside an old sailor, helping him gently to his feet, with more care than anyone had shown her all week. Late that night, when the guests had gone and the party lights were dark,
and the halcyon sat detained and silent at her berth. Tomas Race walked the length of her empty deck alone, checking her lines one last time out of pure habit, the way you'd settle a horse that had been spooked. He didn't do it because anyone was watching. He did it because that, in the end, was the whole point.
In the weeks that followed, though the world would only ever share that one glittering night on the deck, everything rolled out just as Tomas had promised. The Trident review of Castellane Maritime found what such reviews always find once someone honest is allowed to look. Cut corners going back years, deferred repairs, a culture that treated survey day as a thing to be managed rather than passed. The Halcyon went into a shipyard for the repair she should have had in the spring. Belmonte's forgery and coercion became the opening exhibit in an enforcement case that reached the executives above him. Sophia Moreau took command of a vessel for an owner who thanked her, in writing, for the night she said no. Lucia Fernandez became the youngest cadet the Register had ever trained, and still, on the first walk of every survey, wrote down the name of anyone being kind when they thought no one important was watching. Emilio's grandson sat his exams, and Sylvie Castellane kept her empire. She had thrown everyone overboard in time to save it, but sailed the rest of her days on boats crewed by people who had watched her cut her own granddaughter loose on a live broadcast and knew now exactly what her loyalty was worth. Allegra Castellane had a superyacht, a famous name, and a grandmother who owned half the sea. Old Emilio had a canvas sea bag, a dismissal letter, and 30 years of treating strangers like they mattered. Only one of them still had their dignity when the engines finally went quiet.
So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. Was Tomas right to sign on quietly and let the whole ugly week play out? The mocked old man, the bumped captain, the forged paper, before he revealed who he was? Or should he have voided that certificate the moment he first walked up the Passerelle? Tell me below. And be honest about this one too. We have all, at least once, looked straight through the person carrying our bags, or pouring our wine, or tying up our boat, and quietly decided they didn't count. If you believe the biggest yacht in the harbor still can't buy you above basic decency, that how you treat the people who can do nothing for you says more than any name on any hull, then subscribe and stay for the next one. Because next time, we're walking into a hushed Manhattan auction house on the night of a $100 million sale, where a collector's arrogant air humiliates the quiet young woman cataloging the crates in the basement, never once imagining that the hired help in the dust coat is the one expert whose single signature decides whether his family's prized masterpiece is worth a fortune or worth nothing at all. You won't believe how that one ends.